Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. I'm Fish, and today is going to be our first ever Minion Masters Meta video, or as I like to call it, Now, what are we going to do? Well, unfortunately, we don't have access to all the data behind the game. We can't see overall play rates, win rates, broken down by ranks, stuff like that. But we do have access to the leaderboards. So I thought it would be interesting to glean what we could from the leaderboards. Of course, leaderboards are dynamic. They're always changing. So we've just taken a snapshot in a moment of time and just kind of had a look at what's going on at that. But hopefully there should be some good information we can get from it. I thought this kind of video might be useful for a couple of reasons. Firstly, just for information, if you want to know what's going on within the world of Minion Masters. And then secondly, if you're looking to make a deck that's going to be strong in the meta, whether that be following the meta or as an anti-meta kind of deck, then this will give you the kind of the starting point for making that sort of deck. Now, I know we are almost at the end of the season, so that second point is currently almost irrelevant. But maybe going forward, we can do this earlier in the season. But it did take quite a lot of work, quite a lot of time and effort to put this together. So I would really appreciate it if this is something you like and something you would like to see more of. Be sure to let me know in the comments. And if it's something that is well received, then maybe we'll look at it doing it more often. But anyway, without any further ado, let's dive in and see what we can learn. Okay, so the first thing we're going to look at is the popularity of the Masters in the different game modes. And of course, if you've played this season, you can probably pick out of a hat already what you think is going to be the top one. But let's have a look. Okay, so 1v1 game mode, and I know these graphs are kind of small. I tried to make them as readable as possible. We'll try to get through it together. I'll help you along, don't worry. So we've got APEP, of course, over 50% of the 1v1, the top 50 1v1 leaderboard decks were APEP, and that's come as no surprise to anybody. If you've played this season, then you're probably aware of that. APEP in a very, very strong spot and not really going to get much weaker. He's going to get a slight auto-attack nerf in the upcoming patch, I think, but that is about it. Now, also, Wrecked, Morelia, and Valorian are showing in there, but nowhere near the sort of play rates of APEP. And I couldn't fit all the labels on this, so just for completion, the light red is Mordor, the light blue is Milloween, and the teal is King Puff. Now, one thing to note, no Volko and no Ravager. Now, Volko's not a huge surprise. Volko tends to struggle historically in solos since there was a lot of changes to him, but stronger in 2v2 for sure. Ravager not showing is kind of surprising because with the bridge changes, there was a lot of discussion about how it's going to empower aggro decks, and of course Ravager is the aggro master, but no Ravager in the top 50 at this point. Now let's have a look how this compares to our 2v2 randoms. We can see again the blue APEP is dominating, but not quite so dominant as before, and we can see Morelia starting to come into having a higher play rate, and I would say that's because you see a lot of Morelia and a Curse decks working hand in hand. And those are decks that don't really work too well in solos, but are a lot stronger in 2v2s. So Morelia, a much higher play rate here we see in randoms. Mordor getting more play as well. Obviously has his own weaknesses, but in 2v2, your teammate can help make up for those weaknesses. Stormbringer, and here we see Volko wasn't a tool in the 1v1, but Volko makes a showing here in 2v2. So no King Puff, no Wrecked, no Ravager, or no Valorian for randoms. And then rounding out the game modes, 2v2 pre-mades, again, APEP, the most played master according to the data that we got from the leaderboards, but his dominance is the weakest in this game mode. Again, we see Morelia with a larger share compared to her 1v1s, and again, that's going to be the Accursed Morelia. Stormbringer with more of a showing. Diona, the strongest showing of Diona. I was very surprised to see so few Diona decks in 1v1 because she is very strong, but just overshadowed by APEP quite so much. And then we see Volko getting another decent showing there, and again in 2v2 pre-mades, no King Puff, no Wrecked, and no Valorian. So King Puff kind of struggling sort of overall. Nobody's kind of surprised about that. And Wrecked far stronger in solos than in pre-mades and randoms, according to this data. And again, that's something that we could probably have guessed. Now, one of the questions that we get from new players when it comes to deck building and stuff like that is, what should my average mana be? And I normally say sort of between 3.5 to 4.5, something like that is going to be okay. Obviously, there's outliers depending on the sort of deck you're going to play, stuff like that. But let's have a look how the average mana cost changes for the different modes. So we've got 1v1 is an average of 3.5, 2v2 randoms 3.9, and 2v2 pre-mades 3.6. So not too much difference there. And if you're thinking about building a deck, this gives you a good idea of the sort of curves, the average mana costs that the top players on the leaderboards are playing. Right, next up we have a look at the rarities. Now, I think this is a really important thing because we get a lot of people coming into the game and their experience with rarities is the rarer a card, the stronger it is. And that's based on their experience from other games. Now, if you're familiar with the way Minion Masters does it, Minion Masters is very different to that. The more rare a card is, generally the more unique it is. Not necessarily the more strong. So what you're not looking at is, you're not expecting to see a top deck that's full of legendaries. You know, the way it works is you generally select a legendary or two and you build around them. So in theory, that's what we think. But does the information, do the statistics back it up? Well, basically, yes. So is this game pay to win? No. Look at our 1v1 leaderboard composition. Almost half of the cards in the leaderboard decks are common cards. They're the most basic cards. And then we have about almost like a quarter rare, and then we have some supremes and, you know, some legendaries there, but only a tinkling of legendaries. And there, as we mentioned before, you tend to find one or two legendaries in a deck. So if you're wondering if this game is pay to win, no, it's not. Here is the reason and the explanation. Now, if we look in randoms, we can see, again, a lot of common cards, more supreme cards, a few more legendaries, but still we can see the decks dominated by the common rarity. And 2v2 pre-mades, again, we can see the same thing. Common cards, rare, supreme, and then some legendaries. So I think that's a really interesting thing to see. And this could be really helpful for new players to understand that you don't necessarily, you don't want to stuff your deck full of legendaries. Okay, a lot of the common cards are really powerful. You just want to choose some less rare cards to build around and then get a nicely balanced deck. Right, next up we have wild cards. I thought it would be interesting to have a look at what modes are seeing wild cards. Now, the first graph we have, of course, is effectively irrelevant. No wild cards in solos, so just a complete pie piece. But then if we look at 2v2 randoms, so we've got the green, which is no wild cards. We've got the orange, which is using one wild card, and the red, which is using two wild cards. And just to remind you, the wild cards are effectively allows you to play duplicates of a card. So you can play up to 3 copies of one card or 2 copies of 2 cards, assuming that they have the copies allowed stat to allow that. And then if we look in pre-mades, again, 3/4 wildcarded really, and then some 1 and 2 wildcards. Now, I was quite surprised to see this. I thought wildcards would be far more prominent, but they really weren't. So, as a non-wildcard player, I like to see that. Okay, so next up we have the top cards. So a lot of people are, when they're new to the game, they're like, what should I craft? What legendary shall I craft? Well, let's see what's very strong, and that'll give you an idea of the answer to that question. So here we see the top cards in 1v1. We have a Stint, we have an Elite Swarmer, Caged Prowler, very strong at the moment. Nobody's surprised by that. That is going to be getting a change, designed to be a nerf in the next patch. Then we have the Chain Lightning. Again, a lot of people, after the Chain Lightning was, it was reduced to 4 mana, but the number of jumps were reduced and the range were reduced. A lot of people were saying that they killed the card, but they really didn't kill the card at all. They just made it way more versatile, way more playable. And I think we're going to see, I think it's going to lose 1 jump in the upcoming patch. So we're kind of leaking some of the patch notes here, which won't try to spoil everything. But obviously, if it's going to get a nerf, then it's a very highly performing card. Walk-in Blind Date, again, that's a very strong card in the meta, specifically because of the change to the bridges and the fact it can walk onto and grab a bridge. There is a nerf coming to that. I won't tell you about that in this video, but look out for the patch notes video. We'll talk all about it there. Then we have the Cleaver. If you played this season, the Cleaver's kind of been everywhere, and the stats back that up. Then we have the Swarmers, Defenso Chopper, and the Future Present. So those are in 1v1. If you're looking to craft some cards as a new player for 1v1, check. You can't go wrong with those. And a lot of those are common cards, so they're super easy to craft. Now, if we look at the randoms, again, we see the Stint in there. Again, the Walk-in Blind Date. Again, the Elite Swarmer. And now we see things like the Beam of Doom. Beam of Doom, not so strong in solos because you don't get quite so many clumps of units to get the value out of it. But in 2v2, you really can do. Chain Lightning, again, a very common spell. Rocket Scrat, that's great for taking bridges and doing a little bit of clear. And then we see the Curse Bearer. You tend to find more units or bigger units in 2v2, so the Curse Bearer with its Curse Aura can really get a lot more value. And again, we see the Defenso Chopper and the cheap Grenadier. And then rounding out this section, we got the 2v2 pre-mades. So a lot of these cards are showing up in all of the modes, and a lot of them are really cheap cards. So we were wondering about, with the changes, were people going to be moving to more expensive decks? A lot of cheap cards, a lot of cycle decks, still very, very strong. So we've got the Elite Swarmer Stint, Walk-in Blind Date, Crystal Arcanist pops up. Of course, she's very strong. And I think when we looked at the Master split into pre-mades, Stormbringer was in there more often. And of course, Stormbringer you tend to find with Crystal Elves, and the Crystal Arcanist is one of those. Then we had the Swarmers, again the Rocket Scrat, again the Curse Bearer, Beam of Doom, and Chain Lightning. So we've got a few there that are in all of them. So if you're looking to grab some cards that you can play in all sorts of game modes, this is a really good place to find them. Okay, so another question we have for new players is, what legendaries shall I get? You know, people are always excited about getting legendaries. And as we mentioned just a little while ago, legendaries don't necessarily mean they're strong. They just mean they're unique. So if people are itching to craft a legendary, this should give you an idea of what's strong in the current meta. And I'm trying to give you, where possible, information about stuff that's going to get nerfed in the next patch, because otherwise, I don't want to say, oh, this is a really strong legendary, and everyone goes out and grabs it, and then it's dead next season. So we're trying to cover all of our bases here. So in 1v1, we've got Jolo. Did get nerfed recently, but still very popular. Jin Long. We've got Scott, the Sensitive Savage. Ardera, Howling Moon. We've got Snake Druid, Azog, Hypnotize, and Wheel of Doom. Now, of course, all of those cards are very, very different. So if you're looking to build a legendary, there's some good ones, but of course you've got to look into those, try to figure out which ones of those fits into the sort of deck, the sort of gameplay that you're looking. You know, we've got minions, we've got removal spells, we've got all sorts of things in there. Okay, so then if we have a look at the top legendaries in randoms, Howling Moon again, Bara. Bara maybe because because of more Curse decks, potentially. Not sure how often you see Bara outside of those. Zip Zapinator, Lady in Frey. Of course, we see her in a lot of the Stormbringer decks. We've got Caliph, Coax, Colossus, Commander Azali, and of course the Crack Ghoul Doomcleaver. Now, I was quite surprised that the Doomcleaver wasn't quite so heavily featured. I feel like if we think of this, a review of this season, I think the Doomcleaver was very, very strong early season, but people seem to have got better at dealing with it. Right, next up, 2v2 pre-mades. Again, Lady in Frey, High Mage, Laylel, Howling Moon. It's in all three of them. Go get it. We've got Gax, the World Bomb. Again, Jolo here. Again, Zip here. Again, Jing. We've got the Valstalker. And again, the Doomcleaver. So you can see that a lot of these legendaries are versatile. You can play them in solos and in 2v2. So if you're looking to hedge your bets and get a legendary that you can really get the most out of, check out some of those. Right, next up we have the top spells. I thought it'd be interesting to see the top spells that people play often when you're building a deck and you say, I want a couple of removal spells. You check that out. Now, because of the existence of non-damaging removal spells, we do get some weird things in here, like the future that isn't quite following the thought process of this, but you know, that's just the way the data goes. So again, Chain Lightning, very strong. Beam of Doom, very strong. And then we see some Daggerfall, Scrotillery, Bridge Buddies, Frost Feather Flyby, and Blind Date. So, you know, if you're thinking about what removal spells should I take, this gives you a good idea. And then again, if we look in to the 2v2 randoms, we see the Beam is the most popular removal spell, followed by Chain Lightning. And then we see, overall, there's a lot of accursed spells in here, which gives you an idea that the 2v2 randoms meta has a lot of accursed decks. And, you know, you very rarely see an accursed outside of Morelia. So, again, as we looked at the stats earlier, a lot of Morelia's being played. Right, Bear Avalanche, still very strong. Harmful Souls, very strong. But remember, if you're thinking about getting some of these spells, remember, a lot of these are accursed ascension empowered spells, so you don't want to play some of them outside of Accursed Ascension. Unholy Ground you'll see in a lot of different decks, but things like Harmful Souls and Nirvir's Breath, and of course Toll of the Dead in the 9th position there, that is something you will not see outside of Accursed decks. So again, we've got Howling Moon and Bridge Buddies, and closing it out here, 2v2 pre-mades, again the Beam and the Chain Lightning and the Howling Moon, the Bridge Buddies, the Daggerfall, the Dragon Ball, the Arcane Ring, Bear Avalanche, and Poison Strike. So that should hopefully give you an idea of the spells that are very strong at the moment. Okay, and there we have it. Our very first Minion Masters Meta video. It was quite interesting to put together, and hopefully you enjoyed it. As I said, it is quite a lot of work to put together, so if it's something you want to see more of, I encourage you, please let me know in the comments, and hopefully you can encourage me to make it again as we go forward. Now, we are closing in on 2,000 subscribers here in the Fish Tank, which is insane. I want to thank everyone that has followed recently. We've had a lot of new followers, and there's always room for more. So if you want to make sure you don't miss any up-to-date information about Minion Masters, make sure you drop a follow and ding ding, put that bell on, and check out for the upcoming videos. There will be a new video soon about the patch. There is a patch this Thursday, which is going to be patch 1.47. So we'll have a patch notes video with the new cards and all sorts of the balance changes and all sorts of that good stuff. But that's pretty much it here. I'm Bad as a Fish. And as always, this is an Awkward Wave.